Thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's not going on. Green's on, but it's not going. There it goes. Hey, okay. All right, so I'm going to talk real fast because we're way behind time. I'm going to talk about rapid web application development with nitrogen, a.k.a. how to be super rad, like this guy right here, and like my shoes. So I'm going to start with a question, and this opening part is going to be a little bit kind of all over the place because I kind of put it together in kind of a scattered way. But who got into programming initially to make video games? All right, I'd say that's a pretty solid, at least half. And why was that? It was because we were kids, and that's what kids know. Kids don't know business things. They don't know about solving applications, but they do know video games, and that motivates them to get started. And when you want to make games, you find out you need to make tools. So you make your first couple of simple games, and then you start making tools to make your games not suck. So we made our very first apps, which were just the tools. And we found out that making apps was a hell of a lot easier than making video games. And you get that immediate feedback. I use immediate feedback. It really should be instant gratification you get from apps. And the key to that is the whole interface development component of it. And that's a great way to get new programmers into something, to get them to appreciate making something. And that's why you kind of start with the early level languages, why you would start with like Logo, and we started Logo in like 8th grade or something, 7th grade, or Visual Basic or HyperCard or HTML websites on GeoCities. You get that immediate instant gratification from making that kind of stuff. It was mind-blowing when I was like 12 or 14 years old, whatever, and I could draw a window and then draw a button on it and double-click the button and make it pop up a message. It was like, this is great. So that immediate, that instant gratification, just replace immediate feedback with instant gratification throughout this whole presentation. So I'm going to jump to another question. How many times have you heard the following statement? I have a great idea for an app, and let's build a front end in Erlang. Nobody's ever said that. And I think that's a problem, because Erlang is a fantastic language for front-end development, and nitrogen is the tool that makes that possible. So I'm going to jump right into nitrogen, brief history of it. Nitrogen was started in 2008 by Rusty Klophaus. It makes it a relatively old framework in the scheme of things. I took over the project in 2011. Rusty was running out of time working on Basho, and then eventually started his own startup again. We're very soon to be releasing version 2.3, which adds WebSockets amongst a handful of other things. And we also have a book in progress being written by myself and Lloyd Prentice, who's in the audience. So we're going to move on. I'll talk about that near the end if I got time. Hopefully I got time. So I'm going to start by wetting the appetite reel here. This is a real basic. This is a real basic application that I whipped together in about an hour, and I didn't even start my timer. This is the pace I practiced. So to make this fit into 40 minutes, this is the pace I had to talk. So don't sweat it. So basically what this app is, so I whipped this together in about an hour, plus a little bit of time to make the interface with the blockchain API. Basically all it is, we're going to enter in a Bitcoin address, and we're going to click Start Watching, and it's going to live load any transactions from this account. And I'll pick a busy one, and maybe we'll get lucky, and maybe a transaction will happen in the 30 seconds I'm talking about it. So this is a relatively busy one. Hopefully it doesn't crash. That would be embarrassing. Okay. So there it goes. So it went and loaded a bunch of stuff. So this was about an hour of development. It's about 65, 70 lines of code, something like that. And if any new transactions were to come into this address, they'd pop up immediately. So we're going to end up building that near the end of my talk. Really in about 6 minutes, I'm going to start building this. We're going to build it in like 15 minutes. So nothing new has happened while we've been here, so how exciting. So we'll just go ahead and continue on. So hopefully your appetite is sufficiently whetted. I'm going to start by talking about some of the nitrogen fundamentals. Nitrogen consists of two primary fundamentals. The first of which is this reliance on its nitrogen elements component. Basically what it means is you build your front-end application in Erlang records, which is a little bit weird because Erlang records are generally considered to be a wart of the language in a lot of scenarios. But Erlang records serve as a fantastic modeling component for building your front end in kind of representing HTML. These elements end up being either representing HTML in native Erlang or also representing JavaScript in native Erlang so that you don't have to actually write HTML in JavaScript. And that's a key component to it. So as an example of a nitrogen element here, instead of what you would do in typical web development, where you would have input type equals button value, you could save data, give it some ID, and then you end up binding some JavaScript action to it, click save function, and then that saved data function will end up getting called when you click on it, and then it'll package up some data either by JSON, or if you're using Erlang, it might package up BERT or something, and then contact the server. The server will decode the JSON and do something with it, then send you another JSON packet back that says everything's okay. And then this may happen either by a form post, or by AJAX, or by WebSocket, or by comment, or whatever. And that's kind of the standard way that you do normal web development that isn't nitrogen. In nitrogen, you don't do that. You don't need to bind all this stuff to the things. You just have a button, you give it a postback, and that postback is just some native Erlang term. That native Erlang term, then, when you click on that button, will execute something on the server. It'll package up any data that's available in any forms, send it to the server, and you'll work with that. And that moves on to the next component, where nitrogen, the key fundamental of nitrogen is its event-driven nature. Basically, it's reliant heavily on this postback thing, this idea of abstracting the components, abstracting the communication, the channel between the client and the server is huge, because you stop having to use any changing. Oh my God! You stop having to have any context shifts. You just think purely in this event-driven nature. You're always just writing your Erlang code and not screwing around, jumping between JavaScript and what's the scoping rules in this JavaScript function and blah 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 blah. So you're always thinking about building your UI in terms of these postbacks. And this postback is a very familiar pattern. If you do Erlang development, or if you do other functional programming, you're going to be very familiar, because it relies heavily on pattern matching. So an example here is if you've done Erlang anything longer than 45 minutes, you've undoubtedly written a gen server. And a gen server, basically, you have a function called gen server call, you pack up some Erlang term, and it calls it. And then Erlang does something and ends up calling handle call that passes in this sum action, or this Erlang term that you pattern match, and you pattern match it out, you do something with it, and you give it some reply. It happens all the time in Erlang. It's like, it's the bread and butter of OTP. In nitrogen, you have this same idea. You have this postback, which analogously calls this event function. So you have a button. So we have a button with this postback save record ID. Clicking on that button will then, in your page module, execute this event function, and it will pull out that record ID and then do something with it, whatever you want to do. Save that record to the database, yo. So those key nitrogen components, or the nitrogen fundamentals, the nitrogen elements and the event-driven nature, lead us to this no context shift. You build your whole application with pure Erlang. You don't have to screw around with JavaScript. You don't have to screw around with HTML too much. The example I use is the league and tournament management system that I run, which is written in nitrogen. It's approximately 30,000 lines of code. There's 120 lines of JavaScript, but it's a full-on web like interface rich web application. So you can kind of compare it to Node, where Node is convenient because you can do server-side stuff with your client-side language. With nitrogen, you get to do your client-side stuff with your server-side language. Obviously, Erlang isn't quite as popular as JavaScript, but it's still a convenience there. So, okay, we're going to do live coding. All right, so, let's hope I don't butcher this. This is always dangerous. Internet goes out or something, the whole demo's shot. So we're going to start with, this is starting with a basic raw Erlang release, or nitrogen release. Just created a nitrogen release, do a couple of, I did a couple of things like bring in a couple of dependencies, but we're basically just from a majority standalone, right out of the box nitrogen release. So we're going to make, let's see here, okay. Yeah, so we're going to start by making a page. We're going to call it demo v1. I don't know why that was the name that I decided to use, but I always ended up using that name. So in nitrogen, the routing system, we'll replace underscores with slashes. So we would refer to this particular file by calling our address and then demo/v1. Underscores get converted to slashes. So we're going to go ahead and wipe out this whole body and all the event. We don't care about that. That's boilerplate. We're going to say welcome. Now remember, we're going to be creating that same thing that we just did, that I demoed earlier. So we're going to start with kind of a nasty thing here. Container 12. This is the built-in grid 960, which isn't exactly cutting edge, but it gets the job done. And it's built into nitrogen, so it makes it easy, so I don't have to, deal with, like bootstrap classes and all that fun stuff. So what we're doing here, I've created right now a container 12, which is just a 12 side by side, and then very first thing I'm doing is just throwing in an HTML header, and then a panel, which is just a nitrogen term for a div, and we do that because panel is, or because div is an Erlang keyword, so you can't use it as a record thing unless you want to dick around with doing like this, which is nasty. So anyway, where am I? Yeah. Whew. So we're going to complete the body with this entry form, which is just going to be the form that we're going to use to enter in our Bitcoin address to get started. So this is 12 across. Label, just a HTML label that will go with watch a Bitcoin address. I apologize if this is boring as tears right now. I'm typing as fast as I can, and hopefully I can avoid as many typos as possible. We'll give it a little placeholder. So here we got a text box. We've given it the ID address, and we'll end up referring to this your Bitcoin. And then finally, we get a little button, text equals start watching. Now, the way I'm building this is analogous to the way that you would build it. I'm not just going to dump it all out one at a time. We're going to watch. Okay, so it compiled properly. Great. So we load up our thing. Oh, yeah, I changed the port. That was the other thing. Hey, great. So we have our initial interface. If we were to type something in here, it's not going to do anything because we didn't tell it to do anything. Right? So we need to elaborate on that. And we'll notice it should be generating an error, which it didn't do. Oh, because I didn't click the button. Oh. I didn't go to the right path. That's the index file. I knew I was going to make a mistake. So we enter in the thing. We click start watching. There we go. It's actually clicking that time. Now we should have errors. There we go. So we have demo. So all it's saying is it's lacking, for those that haven't read Erlang messages a million times, it's saying that we have an undefined call to a function called demo v1 event with the argument start. So all that meant is that this postback start is trying to call demo v1 event start. That's what's happening. Okay, great. So let's actually make that button do something, shall we? So let's go event start. We can close that up too, make it a little easier to read. Event start address. Now here we're going to retrieve the value of the address from that text box. So those two are the same. The ID equals address. That ends up getting passed in with the WF and retrieved out by this WFQ command. WF update. Here we're replacing the contents of this wrapper element with the contents of a function we're going to call watching form. And then we need to create watching form because we haven't created it yet. So this watching form will completely replace that whole form that we just had in there. So we're going to go grid 6. Previously I had a grid 12. Now we're going to go grid 6. 6 by 6 side by side. And this is a little cheating. This one I had to figure out on my own. Not figure it out on my own. I obviously had to figure it all on my own. Just need to align it. It's going to act a little bit weird if it's not. Oh, sweet! New Humble Bundle. Yeah, see? Games are awesome. So, I'll probably get some really critical email that comes in that nobody's supposed to see, and everybody will read it, and it'll be the end of the world. So, I started... Okay, I'm talking while I'm typing here, but we started by making just a header 3 that shows the address for us, and now we're going to use a QR code. QR code for the address, the data equals address, and we're going to make it big enough that we can do something with it. I'll say 300 because this screen is massive. One more grid 6 here that will give us our list of transactions. Come on now. Are you guys thoroughly entertained by watching me type and mistype everything? Yeah! So exciting. I can only imagine the excitement. Just the... Okay. So basically we have here a simple span element, which is literally just an HTML span, and another panel with the ID transactions. And both of these, both worth and transactions, we're going to end up filling in with data. But before we jump into that, this should compile and this should do something. So if we at least click start watching, hey, it shows us our address, it shows us the QR code, it says it's loading, it obviously isn't because we haven't started anything loading yet. But so far we're making progress. We've got our interface pretty much done. Now we just need to fill some data into it. So the next step then is we need to load the data. Load data for the address. And I hope that my coding style is up to Garrett's standards. So this worth all TXS, that's just the current value. Oh, can you guys see that? Let me do this here. Because I know that thing kind of ends up blocking at the bottom corner. There we go. You shouldn't be able to see that then. Fantastic. We're making our first call to the blockchain API. So this blockchain thing, get address. All this will return is the current value of that address and the list of all transactions that are available. It's like the top 50 in that. The last 50 transactions associated with that address. We're going to dump some data into it. So the text box, or the span that has the ID worth, we're going to format the worth, the value of that, blockchain format value amount. And we're going to insert some transactions. Hey, what else? Oh, hey, sweet, I'm getting tweeted. I thought I disabled it. I said disable for the next day, but I must have forgotten the settings. So we're going to insert all those transactions into the form, and we didn't make this insert transactions function. Insert transactions. So we're going to do txs body equals draw transaction. We use a little list comprehension here. Sorry if it's not clear to the non-Erlang familiars. Is that the word? And then we're going to insert into the top of this transactions panel. So this transactions panel that we set up there, we're just going to insert into the top of that the formatted versions of all these transactions. So finally we need to draw a transaction. Almost there. We're almost getting to the point where you're not going to be super bored. Oh man, how exciting. Just I'm such a popular guy. So last thing, for each transaction, we're going to render a div. And we're going to format the date. String. This uses PHP's date formatting. So that's going to be year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and AM or PM. I need to disable that, holy moly. That's just, how do we disable that? I can't. How about I just hide? Remove from Chrome. I'll just uninstall it. Screw it. I don't have time for that right now. All right, so where are we at on time here? 14 minutes. Okay, so we're formatting the date, which, oh yeah, didn't even do this part. So it brings in the hash. We're not going to care about the hash for now. It brings in the time as an integer, as a Unix timestamp, the value as the integer represented by the number of satoshis, which is Bitcoin divided by like 9 or 8 or something. Action, which is the atom sent or received, and addresses, which is a list of the addresses in binary format as binary strings. So that's where these values are coming from. So we're going to format the time. We're going to do a toList of the action. I mean, we could just do atom to list here, but that's one character shorter, so awesome, right? Now we're going to cheat. I apologize. I said I wasn't going to write any HTML, but I'm writing a B tag. You're going to have to forgive me. Yeah, I did. I wrote CSS up there too. It hurt me to do that, but I was like, it looks so terrible if it's not centered, and I'm not going to like draw CSS just for the, yeah. So all we're doing is just bolding the value of the transaction itself. Finally, we're going to join all the addresses by commas. I mean, we could use we couldn't use string because those are strings. So WF join is just a nitrogen specific function that you use to join a list of things together by other things that don't have to have any particular format. That's a nice little convenient thing. And we're going to throw a horizontal rule at the end so we have some separation. So, crashed. Okay, address is unused. Address is unbound. There we go. Worked. Okay, fantastic. So I'm doing all live loading here. Some of you might recognize this as sync. So let's dump an address, and this should actually bring some data in for us. And if it doesn't, I suck. Hey, it worked first try. Awesome. Woo! Okay. How exciting. Okay, so, oh, jeez, I'm sweating bad. Okay. Oh, you could hear that. So this is the list of all transactions. This is a QR code of the thing. This is let me double check. This is a Bitcoin address that I control. So we're going to end up doing a live demo with this later. So the last thing we want to do to this, so all this is doing right now is this is just making one API call, bringing it in, drawing it on the screen. And we want to do more than that. We want to make this live loading so that every new transaction that comes in automatically scrolls in, or at least automatically shows up. So we're going to make a couple of changes here. They'll be relatively trivial. I got to cheat and code off of paper because if I do it off, we'd be sitting here for too long. So instead of this load data, we're going to end up using Nitrogen's built-in comment functions. WF comment fun. And we're going to do, instead of load data, we're going to call it transaction loop. Make it useful. And then we're going to pass it this extra empty list that we'll deal with here. So what this comment function does is it's going to start a process. It serves similarly to Erlang's built-in spawn functions, which just spawn a process and does something. But it will spawn it with the appropriate context so that it's automatically communicating with the client and with the Nitrogen main system, so that you don't have to do too many magical things. And it'll give you the ability to do lots of cool things with live loading data. So transaction loop. And then this is going to be a list of transactions. And the variable names here kind of suck, and I apologize to Garrett. So basically what we're passing in initially here, this, I don't know how to use this thing. So this TXS is just going to be a list of transactions that we're keeping track of, that we've already displayed. And then this all TXS comes from the blockchain. And now we just need to determine the new transactions are the transactions from the blockchain API minus the transactions we've already displayed. All right, that makes sense? Hope so. If it doesn't, I apologize. So, and we can leave this, this same update is just fine the way it is. Change this to new transactions because we only want to render the new ones. And we're going to do this on a 5-second timer. So we're going to sleep, and then we're going to loop. Now I do this transaction loop with the module. For those of you unfamiliar with Erlang, we do this little module call ahead of time so that the code will live update. And I'll do that, I'll show you that in a moment, so that we can change the contents of the code. XS. Perfect. So there's one last step here. Because we have a running, because this is going to be a process running on a constant loop inside of this commit process, Nitrogen needs to know when to send these actions that we've queued up. We've got this WF update, we've got this WF insert after. All these functions end up calling after a certain point, and we need to make sure that this gets sent off to the client in a reasonable time frame. And we can control that with this WF flush. If we don't call this function, it's literally just going to keep stacking up these commands until something crashes. So you want to do, or until the request completely finishes. Like if the process finally dies, it'll send all the queued up actions. But in this case, we're just going to tell it to flush, and then we're going to sleep for 5 seconds, and then we're going to loop. So this update, so we've added what? Like we changed like one line, like one or two lines of code, and we added like 4 lines of code, and we should be updated from a passive thing to an active thing. So now we have this, hoping this is working, otherwise this demo's going to suck. So we can send, if anybody else has Bitcoin and they want to send it to here, I will refund it, but you don't have to trust me on that. Obviously, there's no chargebacks in Bitcoin, so I mean I could take my 0.001 Bitcoins and run. But yeah, so what we're going to do here is, okay, what was the last one I did? 0.002. So I'm going to do 0.0005, which is like 50 cents or $1. Oh, it's 20 cents. Straight. Tons of money. Tons of money. We're going to send from this address. And yeah, so if we watch, this should theoretically update live. If it doesn't, I'll be so disappointed. Hey, it went. Hey, how exciting. All right, so it's doing all this live, and it's doing all this right now over WebSockets, which the latest version of Nitrogen supports. So it's got an active WebSocket connection going on right now, and what I'm going to do now is for those of you who haven't dealt too much with Erlang, and I don't think too many folks have mentioned it yet, I'm about to blow your mind. For those of you who've done Erlang already, this is old hat, and you can sleep for the next 30 seconds. But what we're going to do is I'm going to make a change to the live polling. So, okay. Oh, field action. Nice thing about using records is when you have a typo, it lets you know. So we have an active WebSocket connection to the server right now. This is a live connection which is really just running on my laptop. But the WebSocket connection is never breaking. But I changed the code of a running loop, which is pretty freaking amazing. And so what we're going to do is all I did, come on. Okay, send. This blockchain app has a tendency to crash, so it's like I gotta kill it after each transaction. It's really nasty. Okay, so I made a change to a running loop, changing the contents in the way that this particular next transaction is going to slide in, and that's the whole point. Right now, when we did it before, it just stuffed right on there. We want it to slide in real nice and gracefully and have it look like a completed app. So if I send this, theoretically, this should slide in nice and pretty like, yeah, all right. First time I had no problems, but I did have problems in the beginning because I don't remember what I did. Okay, so that's basically the completed app. So are you sufficiently blown away? This is, if Carl was mentioning this, these are from the old Disney Coaster game, if any of you have ever played this game. Classic, old school DOS PC stuff. So okay, so I'm going to quick, what's my time looking like? 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to blast through this real fast. Okay, nitrogen features. Approximately 150 built-in elements, actions, and validators. Elements are the HTML equivalents. Actions convert to JavaScript. Validators are a special form of action that validates the input fields when you do form posts. I didn't do anything, whatever. Easily extendable with your own elements. You can easily add your own element. Any large-scale application is going to use your own custom elements because it's an easy abstraction to work with to extend your system. Plugin system goes with that. Obviously, it uses Ajax, comments, and WebSockets. I covered that enough. Built-in jQuery remote, REST, runs on any Erlang web server with SimpleBridge. Neat thing about the new version of SimpleBridge that will be released very, very shortly along with the new version of Nitrogen is that this adds WebSockets to Erlang web servers that don't have WebSockets. So if you have INETs or you have an old version of EmojiWeb or you have a web machine, it's still going to add WebSockets to it, which I think is pretty freaking amazing. I'm going to skip this. Skip that. Website, GitHub, IRC, Twitter, blah, blah. All right, we have a book coming out. It's being written by myself and Lloyd Prentice. It's called Build It With Nitrogen. You can pre-order, you can download the current really, really nasty work in progress right now from builditwith.com/nitrogen. It's a real early version. It's like maybe half done. And if you want to do a pre-order right now, we're only taking pre-orders with Bitcoin, but we're doing a humble bundle, pay what you want. That was funny that the humble bundle came out in the middle of that. Pay what you want. For a physical copy, we want at least $12, I think, because that'll cover the cost of shipping and manufacturing. We won't make a dime from that. So why did I talk about games with Visual Basic earlier? And the reason I talked about it is because Nitrogen makes interface development accessible in Erlang. And that's huge for on-ramping new programmers into Erlang. Erlang has always seemed as this obtuse thing, and everything everybody's been talking about today has been massive concurrency and how to handle a billion things, but most people are building crappy little apps for their office. And thank you. So if you want to on-ramp new developers into a language like this, you have to make it accessible in some way or another. And I really think that this Nitrogen methodology where the abstraction we declined in the server, making that as easy as possible with as immediate gratification as possible is huge for something like Erlang like this. So that's kind of where I'm getting at. So I don't know if I have time I probably don't have time for questions. Whatever. I'm around all day. So just come find me. Holy shit.
So